In late September 2025, the quiet community of Marion County, Florida, woke up to a wave of panic. A 17-year-old boy had reportedly been kidnapped and shot by a group of men in a white van. The claim spread faster than anyone could control. Phones buzzed, televisions interrupted regular programs, and social media filled with warnings and prayers. The story sounded terrifying, a young life in danger, a violent crime on the loose. But what no one knew yet was that this entire nightmare would soon unravel into one of the strangest hoaxes Florida had seen in years. This is the true story of the Florida teen who faked his own abduction. It started on the night of September 25th, 2025. Deputies at the Marion County Sheriff's Office received an emergency call from a distraught mother. Her teenage son had texted her a horrifying message. He said he'd been kidnapped. He said he'd been shot and dragged away by 4 Hispanic men driving a white van. Then the messages stopped. Officers rushed to the area the phone's signal last showed. Within minutes, they found his car, a small sedan parked by the edge of a lonely dirt road. The windshield had a bullet hole. The driver's seat was splattered with blood. A phone lay smashed nearby, its screen shattered. On the ground, drag marks led toward the trees. Everything about that scene screamed violent crime. Investigators worked under flashlights as yellow tape went up. The sheriff called for backup, a K-9 unit, and a search drone. In a matter of hours, every available officer was on alert. An Amber Alert was drafted and broadcast across Florida. The alert described a teenage male, possibly abducted and shot, last seen near a rural highway. Patrol cars blocked intersections. Helicopters scanned the woods with infrared cameras. By dawn, the entire community was on edge. Parents kept their children home from school. News crews arrived live from the roadside. The sheriff's department fielded dozens of tips. White vans spotted everywhere, each one turning out to be innocent drivers. Yet as the hours passed, cracks began to show. Detectives reviewed traffic camera footage from the surrounding roads. Not a single camera had captured a white van matching the teen's description. Nearby residents hadn't heard any gunfire. And when crime scene technicians examined the drag marks by the car, they noticed they were short, too short to represent a full-body drag. Still, no one wanted to believe the worst, that the abduction might be fake. For investigators, it was safer to assume danger until proven otherwise. That evening, search teams combed through miles of forest. They found nothing. Then, on the second day, a deputy noticed something strange on a dirt path several miles from the car. Footprints, fresh ones, leading toward a patch of thick brush. Cautiously, the deputy approached, and there, lying on the ground with a bandaged leg, was the missing teenager. He was alive. He told the deputy that he had escaped from his captors after being dumped on the roadside. He looked exhausted and frightened. There was a visible gunshot wound on his thigh. At first, it sounded like a miracle, a rescue story with a happy ending. But as the sheriff's team examined the details, the story quickly began to unravel. The angle of the gunshot wound was downward, almost perfectly vertical, an odd direction for a wound supposedly inflicted during the struggle. His wrists and ankles had no marks, despite claiming he'd been tied. His clothes were dirty, but not torn, and the blood patterns on his car didn't match the story of someone dragged away by strangers. Investigators secured a warrant to search his home and devices. What they found changed the case completely. In the days before the supposed abduction, the teenager had bought a small camping tent, a bicycle, and ammunition. He had also searched online for how to fake a kidnapping and how to survive in the woods. He had even created notes on his phone outlining what to text his mother once the plan began. Detectives pieced together the sequence. He drove to the remote road, fired a bullet through his windshield, cut his own leg slightly for blood marks, smashed his phone, then shot himself in the leg to make the story convincing. He limped into the woods, hid his bicycle, and waited while the world believed he'd been taken. It was a staged crime scene, detailed, dangerous, and painfully real-looking. Investigators later learned that he had used AI writing tools to generate fake messages and images to strengthen his lie. The technology gave his story credibility. Screenshots looked authentic. Text seemed emotional. For 24 hours, the county had believed a crime that never existed. When confronted with the evidence, the teen eventually confessed. According to the sheriff's report, he said he felt invisible. He said he wanted people to notice him, to worry, to care. He hadn't expected the response to become so big or the police to take it so seriously. After being treated for his gunshot wound, he was arrested and charged with several counts: filing a false police report, presenting false evidence, possession of a firearm by a minor, and obstruction of justice. Sheriff Billy Woods held a press conference. Standing before a sea of microphones, he said, "This wasn't a joke. This was an elaborate hoax that put lives at risk. My deputies worked through the night, believing a child had been abducted. That time can never be recovered." The sheriff's words resonated. Emergency resources had been drained. Helicopters, forensic labs, roadblocks, all activated for something that wasn't real. Taxpayers would shoulder the cost. News outlets across the U.S. picked up the story. The narrative shifted from missing teen to Florida hoax. Comment sections filled with debates. Was he mentally unwell? Was this a cry for help? Or was it simple manipulation? Psychologists later commented that social media pressure can push teenagers into extreme actions. In an era where online attention is currency, the line between reality and performance often blurs. Some teens, they said, mistake visibility for value. For his family, the emotional toll was devastating. His parents, who had spent a sleepless night thinking their son was dead, now faced public embarrassment and legal chaos. Neighbors who had joined search efforts felt betrayed. Some defended the boy, saying he needed counseling, not condemnation. Others demanded accountability, arguing that his actions endangered real victims by undermining public trust. The sheriff's office emphasized a critical point. Every false report ties up officers who could be saving actual victims. In 2024 alone, Florida law enforcement recorded dozens of unfounded calls that delayed genuine emergencies. This case, they said, was a wake-up call. In court, the prosecutor described the hoax as a dangerous lie amplified by technology. The defense attorney asked for compassion, saying the teenagers suffered from isolation and sought attention in the worst possible way. The judge ultimately released him to parental custody, pending further evaluation. Because he was a minor, his record may eventually be sealed, but the social consequences will linger for years. Across the county, residents reflected on how easily misinformation can spread. Within minutes of the first alert, the fake story had reached thousands. Even reputable outlets repeated early assumptions without verification. For many Floridians, this was a reminder of how vulnerable truth can be in a digital age. Law enforcement experts later held community meetings explaining the investigative steps that helped them detect the hoax. They highlighted forensic details, the trajectory of the bullet, the absence of tire marks, the mismatched footprints, all subtle clues that pointed to fabrication. For young people watching, the case became a cautionary tale about how quickly lies can spiral. What began as a moment of panic in one household ended as a statewide incident. And for the teenager at the center, what started as a search for attention became a story he'll never escape. In interviews, neighbors said the boy had seemed quiet, polite, and introverted. He wasn't known for trouble. That made the revelation even harder to understand. Psychologists explained that such behavior can come from deep emotional strain, depression, guilt, or loneliness masked behind normal routines. The sheriff's department used the moment to start an outreach program focused on youth mental health, encouraging students to speak up before desperation leads to destruction. They invited counselors to schools and created online resources teaching how false reporting harms communities. For weeks, the story remained one of the top read articles in Florida news. Then, as always, the world moved on. But in Marion County, the ripple effects stayed. Officers spoke of wasted hours they'd never get back. Dispatchers remembered the fear in the mother's voice that first night. Even the community that had rallied to help now viewed similar alerts with quiet skepticism. That's one of the most damaging effects of hoaxes like this. They erode trust. The next time a real abduction happens, people might hesitate, questioning whether it's true. And that, authorities say, is the greatest tragedy of all. No one died in this case, but reputations were bruised, resources drained, and faith in public alerts weakened. The Florida teen's story reminds us that technology is powerful. It can spread truth or amplify lies. It also reminds us that our words and actions online have real-world consequences. As investigators packed up the last of the evidence, one deputy reportedly said, "It's strange. We spend our careers searching for truth, and sometimes the truth is that there was never a crime at all." That sentence captures the essence of this case. A story where the crime wasn't violence, but deception. In the end, justice wasn't about punishment. It was about understanding. The sheriff's department hoped that by sharing the truth publicly, other young people might learn from it that attention built on lies always collapses. And so, this strange Florida hoax faded from the headlines, but stayed in people's minds, a symbol of how fragile truth can be and how essential honesty still is. This has been 7Crime. Real stories, real lessons, real consequences. If you found this story insightful, subscribe and follow 7Crime for more true crime documentaries told with accuracy and respect.